We're going to move into setting up for the squat. I'm just going to talk a little bit here about some of my training at Westside Barbell years ago. I get a lot of questions about that. People want to know what the environment looked like a little bit and stuff like that as well. The first day I ever trained at Westside Barbell we did a rack deadlift. You know, the weight was elevated, partial range of motion deadlift. And workout started really early there. It's in Columbus, Ohio. That's where Westside Barbell still is. It was right next to a donut shop, the old gym. And they tried to black out the window because they didn't want anybody to know that they're there. There was no signage. It was a tiny little space, smelled really bad, and was just super gross, full of every fat guy that you could find in Columbus. And my first training day there, I remember it was snowing outside. I was super nervous just to even go in the gym, even though Louie and I already talked about me training there. But one guy after another is 300 plus pounds. At the time, I was probably about 235, 240, and just looked a lot different than everybody else in there. Was certainly a lot weaker than everybody else that was in there. And so the first movement that we did was a rack deadlift. And the weight was already on the bar when I walked in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Keep in mind, it's like 30 degrees outside. I'm in a jacket, I'm all bundled up, and the second I walk in the door, Louie's like, "You're up." And I was like, "Okay." He said to be here at 8:30, and and I got there at 8, and he's like, and he always talks super fast, so I didn't even really know what he said, but he said something to the effect of like, if you're not 45 minutes early, then you're 15 minutes late. So I was like super confused, and I was like, maybe he should just tell me. Maybe he should have just told me what the fuck time to show up, and I would have gotten here at the right time. If you're not 45 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late. I was like, what the hell? Then I was thinking about that for the whole workout. It threw my training off for the day too a little bit. A weird thing to say to somebody. So we get into the workout, and right away he's got the 100-pound plates on there. I'm not very strong at the time, and so I'm thinking, oh shit, this is already 245. Then they proceed to throw another pair of hundreds on the bar. Now we're at like 445 pounds. And he just wanted me to keep doing triples for the day. So then the next one, he now has 645 on the bar. And I'm like trying to think of like, I should probably tell him that this is gonna be super heavy, and I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to work. It doesn't look like it because they already threw another 100-pound plate on there. And that's just the way things were at Westside Barbell. They just kept on throwing on 100-pound plates. They didn't care that much about warming up. No one ever stretched. I don't think maybe now they might have foam rollers now, but no one was ever doing anything like that. So I get to the 645 pounds. I do one rep with it, and I nearly die. Pretty proud of myself that I did the one rep. I go for a second rep, and I got nothing. And Louie we're in a group of about 6 other lifters, and some of the strongest lifters in the world at the time. There's Chuck Vogapool, Matt Smith, John Stafford, a bunch of maniacs, a bunch of guys that set all-time world records. 1,000-pound squats, 800-pound benches, very normal, and you just see it in there all the time. 700-plus pound deadlifts, 800-pound deadlifts. So I get the one rep, and then I go for the second rep, and I'm just rounded over, looking like a dog shitting on the front lawn position, right? Drop the weight, I'm like, fuck. The second I turn around, Louie just points at me and goes, "You're out." And so I was like, all right, well, fuck, I'm kicked out of the group, I guess, right? So I go and do lat pull downs, glute ham raises, reverse hypers, stiff leg deadlifts. Everything I did was for 3 or 4 sets, and I'm getting through it pretty good. I was in pretty good shape at the time, so I'm getting through the workout pretty fast. And I was like, oh, I should, keep moving and not let these guys kind of see me like not doing anything. So I go outside and I drag the sled for a little bit in the snow, and I come back in, and they're still loading weight on the bar. So I worked out for about 15, 20 minutes in that quick work up to 645. But then they were there for another full hour just adding plates on the bar. And I think Chuck Vogelpohl finished with like 1,040 something out of the rack with some straps on. And it was just insane. Blood shooting out of his nose and out of his back and out of everywhere else you can think of. Or not of his, it was out of his ear. That's what I remember. I remember it was out of his ear, and I was like, that's a new one. I'm going to chalk that up to be a new one. I haven't seen that one before. But it's pretty wild, and the environment is the key. You want to try to get around like-minded people. You want to try to get around other people that want to get better. You don't want to have it be so abnormal that you want to lift heavy. You want to tell somebody of your goal, hey man, I want to deadlift 725 pounds. And you want somebody else to be like fired up and excited about it. Rather than be like, oh really? Like, it's weird for what? How many of you guys have gotten that before? Oh, Omar, you still doing all that heavy lifting stuff? Yeah, motherfucker, I am still doing the heavy lifting stuff. Why? You make any money doing that? People are weird about it, aren't they? But the thing you guys need to understand is that people that train know a secret. The secret of training makes us so much different than your average person. You can literally make yourself made out of something different than everybody else. Because you're in the gym, not just building your body, not just building strength. You're in the gym building your mind and building just a better person in general. Training is lifting weights and exercising the way that we do, I refer to as artificial exercise. It's fucking made up because we don't need to do manly shit anymore. We don't need to go out, sorry ladies, we don't need to go out and dig ditches and chop down trees anymore. And we don't need to kill our own food. So you need to come in here and make up shit to do, like, oh, I'm going to pick this weight up off the ground. Meanwhile, that could represent you shooting a deer and you pulling it into the back of a vehicle, or you pulling it somewhere, putting it up on a horse and buggy or whatever the fuck it would be, right? We don't have to do a lot of the same things that people had to do hundreds of years ago, carry buckets of water or whatever the case is. And so we have these artificial means of coming in and loading these weights up. But the resistance that we have in here today, we can use that as the same hard work, the stuff that you saw in Rocky IV, of Rocky going out and kind of doing the old school shit, like he was literally chopping down a tree, right? He's pushing logs over his head. He's walking with a wheelbarrow. Why was all that stuff so impressive? Because you're like, oh, that's just like manual labor wrapped up into like some crazy workout. We just happen to load it up a little bit heavier than normal. But that kind of stuff is more impressive and cooler in some ways than just moving around a barbell that's designed to lift weights. But each and every time you walk through the doors of the gym, it's an opportunity to get better. Remember I said in the beginning, you got to replace the word work with opportunity. And what a cool opportunity it is to come inside Fortis Fitness, where they have these specialized bench presses. They got all kinds of squat racks and deadlift platforms and band attachment and chains and belt squats and places to do pull-ups and places to do this, places to do that. A specific thing for all kinds of different movements. This is a great place to be able to get stronger, and the different gyms that you're training in and the different people that you get around, that's going to be one of the things that makes the biggest difference is the people that you get around. When I went to Westside Barbell and when I moved to Columbus, Ohio to train at Westside Barbell, that's weird and crazy, and for what? I didn't have a job, and it wasn't like I was really relocating for a job. I was doing professional wrestling at the time, and there's some more stuff intertwined into that story than just that, but think about that. Those are the kind of sacrifices that some of you guys might end up having to make. I've gone to seminars and stuff where I didn't have any money or any real means of figuring out how to get there, but I figured out how to get there, and I made it work. Now you guys see the Meathead Millionaire story, and you see the Slinger Mansion, and the car, and the this and that. When I met my wife years ago, 20 years ago now, going on 17 years of marriage next month, give me a hey now. Hey now. I had absolutely nothing. I literally had nothing. I didn't have a license, Couldn't have a license because I had so many tickets in New York, I couldn't even get a driver's license. Had a lot of debt, had no money, had no nothing. All I had was this handsome face and these giant biceps. But I've been in some of these places, some of these predicaments that you guys are in maybe right now. I've been there before, and it takes time to crawl out of some of that. But over a long period of time, if you chip away and keep working towards getting better, what you do to get better doesn't always have to mean that you come in the gym and bench 405 pounds. It could be you reading a new article. It could be you watching a new YouTube video. YouTube's a crazy resource. I've said this before in other seminars, but the internet can be used for other things other than pornography. What? Danny Lear's shocked. First time he's heard that. There's a lot of great resources at your fingertips. There's a lot of great resources around you. And you want to try to surround yourself with some of the best people. You want to get around like-minded people. If you don't think they exist and you don't think they're close by, then go to them, like I did. SuperTraining gym is free. The gym is free. Come see me, West Sacramento, California. We're getting a bigger spot so I can accommodate everybody. Come check out SuperTraining gym. Get around people that know what the fuck's going on. Surround yourself with some of the best. Inspire other people and ask they do the same of you. When you push somebody through a set, I went up to him and screamed at him when he was deadlifting 585 the other day for 3 reps. Never met him before in my life, but I was fired up. I was like, shit, he's got a ton of weight on there. I'm going to go scream at him. But hopefully, if we were in the same environment, hopefully I do that for him one time. He sees me again. He's like, oh shit, he was yelling for me, and that helped me. Well, maybe he starts yelling for me too, and that gets me fired up. We all need that. We all need emotion. You know, you might think motivational speeches and some of these things are bullshit or they're artificial and that they don't really work. They've done studies and they've done research on people like yelling for other people, encouraging other people. They did a thing with a UFC fighter where he was hitting a heavy bag, and they did all kinds of crazy shit with him. They gave him caffeine, they injected him with adrenaline, they played music, they yelled at him. When they yelled at him, he had the greatest response, he had the greatest force output. And when they were yelling at him, they were yelling crazy shit about him because he has children. So they're yelling at, like, this is for your kids. Then he started really knocking the shit out of the bag. I mean, maybe you're not going to say that for a friend because you don't want to, like, bring up weird family shit that might evoke them turning around and punching you, right? But you get the point. The point is we got to all do this together. And if you're training by yourself, that's cool. It could be fun. But I encourage you guys, try to get around other people. It's so much more fun when you can get around other people. Encourage each other. It's easier to get better when you have help. Nobody does anything without help. I'm standing in the position I am today because I have fucking awesome parents. I have people that care about me. I have people that never gave up on me. There's been a lot of people that have given up on me over the years. But my parents were always there the whole time. Not everybody has that. I recognize that. But what are you going to do? You're going to fucking cry about it? Because you grew up poor? Or because you grew up without a dad? How long are you going to act like an asshole over it? How long are you going to stop mistreating yourself and people around you over something that happened a long time ago? My wife's dad passed away when she was 10 years old. My wife is a Division I swimmer. She's one of the toughest, strongest people I've ever seen in my life. She's one of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life. One of the most loving and caring people I've ever met in my life. She's never once used that as an excuse to hold her back on anything. Hey! This guy loves clapping. It can really help a lot when you get around other people. But even in my wife's case, she had her mom to lean on. Her mom was strong enough for the whole family that she had somebody to lean on. We all need somebody. Get around people that want to train. Get around people that want to get better. I know you might think like, oh man, like I wish I could find that. I wish I could Fucking create it. I did. Create it. This gym is like that. And you guys, you're always gonna think about the 2 or 3 people that you hate. You're like, oh yeah, but this motherfucker and this guy. Or you're always thinking about the 2 or 3 bad YouTube comments that you get instead of the thousands and thousands of people that love and appreciate every single thing that you do. Try to get around some like-minded people. Get around people that want to be better, people that want to see you do better. We're going to go over the squat. Right? All right, so we talked again about the positioning of our body overall, right? Trying to pull that chest up, trying to keep your stomach tight, and we're going to pull the elbows down and in. It's for all 3 lifts. All 3 lifts are going to be a little bit the same. Where I see the most dysfunction in a squat might not be where you think. I see the most dysfunction in a squat in the upper body. My strength in the squat, even though I did some pretty impressive stuff in powerlifting gear, later when I tried to shift towards doing some raw lifting, I was never able to get the bar in a low bar position and never able to have the bar in a spot that I felt would allow me to display my strength the best. So my mobility was a limiting factor, and I'd have to go backwards in my training so much, and I have to work so much on mobility that it wasn't anything that I cared about working towards so hard. It would take me way too long to make progress towards it. But I knew what the problem was, and I see the same problem with a lot of other lifters, where they're from the belly button upward, they're too stiff in the shoulders and too stiff in their sternum to arch properly for a good strong squat. So mobility can be something that holds you down. That's why I went over that earlier today, the 33%. 33% of your training should be strength. 33% of your training should be hypertrophy. Sometimes those two, luckily, they overlap sometimes. And 33% of your strength has to be devoted to mobility. It has to be. It has to be part of what you're doing. Could you stretch in between some of your warm-ups that you're doing? Could you stretch your lats in between every set of bench press that you're doing? Of course you could. Of course you could mix in more than you're currently doing, right? There's going to be places where you could put some of it. Maybe even you just say to your training partner, say, hey, dude, let's fucking stretch at the end of the workout. Like, let's kill ourselves here. Let's make ourselves accountable before we go share a Quest bar and watch Django again. Let's stretch each other out. I mean, let's use some bands and stretch. Hey, now. All right, so Omar's going to get himself set up underneath the bar. Where you have your hands positioned is going to be a lot about mobility, but each person's going to be a little bit different with their hand placement. Where you hold the bar and where your hands go, I'm not that concerned with. Find a spot that feels comfortable for you and work within that spot for a while. After you start to get the form and technique down overall and in general, then you could start worrying about high bar, low bar, and moving the bar around. But at first, if you're pretty new to it, just start working on just getting that bar on your back. So from here, there's a lot of people that talk about shifting the hips back. And there's a lot of people that talk about shifting the knees forward. A lot of people will say, hey, a squat needs to be cued from the knees first. Somebody else will say, oh, it needs to be cued from the hips first. Remember I talked earlier about not being able to see 2 things at one time? Luckily, our body can perform more than one thing at a time. So I like to see lifters aim to do a little bit of both. Force the knees forward and force the butt back simultaneously as you drop down into a squat. What we're really looking to do is we're looking to take our upper body and almost drop it in between our lower body. Mark Ripito got a lot of heat for teaching people how to squat a very specific way, but he was only trying to teach thousands of people to squat one particular way. And when you're trying to deal with that many people, most people are not mobile enough to squat upright the way Ass Muffin is squatting right now. Most people will lean forward a lot. So Mark Ripito taught people to lean forward on purpose. He's like, this is an easier way for them to squat. So as he comes back up out of the squat, you can see he's got the knees coming forward quite a bit. He's got the toes pointed out. People ask questions about your toes. Some lifters will say, you want to have your feet more straight ahead. what matters is that you're comfortable and that you're not in a compromised position. He's not bleeding out strength anywhere that I can see that would be of compromise for him to maintain a good, strong, solid position throughout an entire range of motion. That's what we said earlier, powerlifting is really all about. We got to maintain a position. So once he unracks that weight and he gets settled through here, he wants to try to maintain this body posture he has here. He's going to suck air into his stomach. He's going to push his hips back, his knees forward at the same time, and drive the knees outward. And out of the bottom, he's going to push his back into the bar the best he can. And he's going to drive through and drive his hips forward. When you start to squat some heavy weight and you start to feel things, you can rack the weight for a second. There's some really like negative self-talk that we start doing. And you get all fired up and you start thinking about your workout the next day. And you're like, oh man, tomorrow's squats, I'm super fired up, it's going to be awesome. You get to the gym, you had your pre-workout, you're all fired up, your favorite song's on, and you go to just squat one plate and you realize, holy shit, that hurts really bad. And now all the tough guy stuff and all the stuff you told yourself you were going to do about how you're going to be better, how you're going to be stronger, how you're going to really work on it, a lot of it has kind of gone out the window because now you're like, oh shit, I didn't know my hip hurt today. What the hell is that? What you need to try to shift yourself towards doing is some sort of distraction or some form of positive self-talk, some sort of reassurance that the day is going to be okay. I know this sounds a little bit funny, but what you want to try to do instead of going, holy shit, my hip hurts. By the way, don't ever talk about it out loud. That's not good either. You save it till after the workout if you got to tell somebody that's something. You don't want to bring down the whole group. Instead of that, unrack the weight again, try another squat, and start thinking about your technique and start thinking about your form. And say, oh, you know what? I'm going to work on having my body weight distributed all the way through the center of my foot. This is what great marathon runners do, triathletes, people that can endure incredible amounts of pain, people that do those ultra marathons, they run 100 miles. Instead of them thinking about their toenails falling off, which their toenails fall off, they run so hard and for so long, they run right through their fucking socks and right through their shoes and everything. And their toenails literally fall off their feet while they're running. Instead of them thinking, imagine how painful that would be. Instead of them thinking about the pain that they have, they think about how their foot is striking the ground. It's a totally different conversation, right? A totally different conversation of saying, oh shit, my hip really hurts when I'm squatting, back to, oh shit, I gotta force my knees out a little bit. I gotta do A, I gotta do B, I gotta do C. Also, you can just take care of yourself a little bit better, and when you go to do a movement, if there is some negative feedback, you can maybe take a minute to maybe just warm up a little bit more, or go back and stretch a little bit more, or do whatever is necessary. Remember we talked in the very beginning, what's necessary for the workout? Well, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to be better? Are you just talking about being better? Are you only doing like 3 things towards being better? Or are you devoted to doing anything possible to get to where you need to get to, within reason, right? You want to make sure that you're doing the best you possibly can and putting in the greatest effort that you can. Don't get anxiety and don't think that your whole workout's going to be screwed up because you took 6 minutes to stretch and warm up. When Furious and I lifted today, and when we lifted yesterday, we did about 6, 8, maybe 8 to 12 minutes of a warm-up. Not only did it not affect the workout, it improved the workout. We weren't sure whether Furious Pete was going to hit the 405 today. And a lot of the stuff we did prior, we did dumbbell bench press, we did lat pull downs, we did a tricep extension, and we did hammer curls. We did 4 sets of 25. We did 100 reps on each. We did 400 extra reps of work before we ever laid down the bench press. Now you would think, oh shit, that's probably going to fatigue him. It didn't. It made him better. Take your time. Whatever you need to do to be better for that particular day, fucking get it done. You always want to have an intent of the day, and your backup, your audible, is always trying to figure out how to salvage the day. If you're supposed to go as heavy as possible and you unrack the weight and you're like, this ain't happening, there's no fucking way, you try to talk yourself out of it, try to talk yourself back on the right path. If that doesn't work, what do? A lot of you guys have been listening. A lot of you guys have been watching for a long time. What the fuck do we do if we're in a bad predicament? Anybody know? Other than take steroids. There we go. Somebody's been paying attention. Do something that you've never done before. Because why? Because then you set a fucking PR. The invisible balloon will be sent to your house from howmuchyoubench.net. Express shipping. The shipping's free. The whole thing's free. We get it taken care of for you. How awesome is that? You go from saying, oh shit, I'm supposed to do a max set of 3, and you're doing front squats, and you're just you know it's not going to happen. Because sometimes you just know, right? Sometimes you just know, like, you're up against it. It's not happening. Well, there could be a million excuses on why. Omar knows about excuses. Got so frustrated, he just walked right out of here yesterday. There can be a lot of reasons why, right? But now we have to still figure out a way. How do we salvage the day? Salvage the day by trying to do something maybe we've never done before. What if you were just to select a weight? Let's say your max front squat is like 405 pounds. What if you just took 275 and did as many reps as you could with it? Or 315? It'd be a new PR. It would be some work that you got in for the day. Or what if you were like, you know what? This is just insanely heavy. I'm going to take a moderate weight and I'm going to do, 3 sets of 8 with it. A lot of times your best move is to get it over with all in one shot and to try to do like a high rep set and just and be done with it and move on to the next movement. If you feel bad about the first movement that you did, if you feel shitty about it, I don't know about you guys, a lot of times I don't finish the rest of my workout very well. It's too distracting. This stuff means way too much to me. It makes me too sad. I'm a sensitive guy. And I can't really recover from it. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking, man, like Asmuff and he beat me on that damn squat. I'm going to be too frustrated about it, and I'm not going to be able to get through everything else that I should. I'll be able to get through everything else that I should if I can make myself feel a little bit better about this for the day by doing something I've never done before, having a PR, having some fun. That turns the whole day around, and then next thing you know, you're blazing through all your assistance exercises. Anybody have any questions on the squat?
How do you deal with torso rotation? Like when you're coming up?
Yeah, I see that quite a bit. Sometimes people will kind of tilt to one side. There's so many different reasons on why something like that can happen. Number one is your foot placement. I think a lot of people from doing other sports and from just maybe some bad habits or tight hips or whatever, make sure that your feet are always even. You might want to even try to set up some tape on the floor or something on the floor so that you can see that your feet are even. I see a lot of people are squatting with their feet uneven. And if you can turn around for me, Omar, come over here. Just get in like a bottom squat position. What I see happen a lot is that the back end of people's heel, because their knees will cave in a little bit a lot of times because lower back and hips and things like that are pretty tight. When that happens, a lot of pressure will come off of here, and then every time they go to squat, they'll kind of just keep dipping to one side over and over again. And I see that problem with a lot of lifters, that back end, sometimes on both sides, will come up. So you want to concentrate on 2 major things. Number 1 is, where the hell are your feet on the ground? And then number 2, what are happening to your feet when you're actually going through the lift? Everything travels up and downstream. It all starts with your feet. That's what's in contact with the floor. And so that's where you're going to want to try to start everything out at. You can also try to do a partial range of motion and see if the problem improves at all. Because that would tell me that you're corkscrewing somewhere. You may want to try to, if you're facing a wall, it'd be easier to square yourself up with a wall. If you're not facing a wall, it'd be a little bit more difficult, but you want to make sure that your shoulders are kind of square. If you feel one shoulder veering off, this will sound a little bit weird, but this works really well. You may want to intentionally line up a little bit crooked to make yourself move straighter. I've had this happen a lot of times on the bench press where I've seen people, they always kind of tilt to one side. I've had them either move their hand out or move their hand in on one side to the point where their finger is on the ring. differently from one side to the other on purpose, and they'll lift more weight that way. So there's going to be some deviation in every lift that you do. So that pretty much answers that question. I forgot to talk a little bit about the width of your feet. So I did mention, with Omar, he's going with his feet pointed out a little bit. There's going to be different ways. You have different ways that you can squat. You can do a regular squat. You can do a front squat. You can do a bunch of variations of squats. When in your training, it's my belief that you should explore a lot of different ways of squatting. It doesn't always make sense to just squat in the same position all the time. When we're trying to get stronger on a bench press, we use different grips. But the second that we start talking about using different widths on a squat, people start to get all upset and they start to think that you're trying to bastardize the lift somehow. Try some different widths and try some different foot positions. When you train with your foot pointed straight ahead, it's a lot more tension on your hips. And it's something that everybody should be working on, because most of the people I see squatting and deadlifting have shitty hips. Their hips don't move the right way. A lot of people really struggle getting proper depth. A lot of people aren't able to explode out of the bottom of a lift. Again, using Stan Efforting as an example, a lot of the stuff we did with him was we did a lot of box squats. We did a lot of stuff where we pointed his feet a little bit straighter than he liked. And the result was his hips became insanely powerful. His hips, his lower body, his lower back, his butt, everything became insanely powerful to help him get some of those world record squats. When he went to the meet, he just did whatever was comfortable, because we're not trying to overload that movement so much that we're trying to put him in a compromising position where he could potentially get hurt. So again, trying a wider stance with your feet straight ahead, trying some box squats. A box squat is a really good opportunity to squat in a different position, to try to squat with your feet out a little bit wider. Why not have some variety in some of the stuff that you're doing? Another question about the squat? What you got?
Box squats. A lot of people said all the time about box squats, and it's typically only useful for a gear lifter, someone who's putting on. And you've obviously proven here to stand out and having him train as a box squat, squats in the game. That's always been for wider to single stance squat. Is there much carryover, much purpose of training on a box of a very narrow squat?
There's carryover from every single thing that you do inside of a gym, is my opinion. So if you're doing a leg extension, I can justify why that's going to help your squat, because maybe quite possibly it's helping increase the size of your legs. Just like a tricep pushdown might help increase the size of your triceps. Keep in mind, sometimes some of these variations of exercises that we're doing are important because they are variations of the exercise that you're doing. Barbell movements are great because they're barbell movements, and they're also dangerous and shitty because they're barbell movements. You can only utilize a bar so many different times in so many different ways before it starts to break you down if you do it the same way every single time. But the more variety that you can add to it, the better off you're going to be. So you don't want to add so much variety to it that it's insane that you have this list of exercises that you only get to every 17 years. But it is a good idea to mix some things up a little bit. Originally, box squats, in the initial form of box squats being invented by Westside Barbell, which was not originally in Columbus, Ohio. Westside Barbell was originally owned by a guy named Ed Peanuts West, who had Westside Barbell in Culver City, California. That gym had some of the strongest people in the world in the late 60s and 70s. And that's where the box squat actually came from. Now, they started using box squats because a few guys had some injuries to their lower back, and they were trying to figure out a way to get some of these guys to still train. Well, they started doing box squats, and a lot of their strength started to go back up. What they noticed immediately about a box squat, different from a regular squat, was that there was a lot less soreness associated with a box squat as opposed to a regular squat. So a box squat's never going to replace a regular squat permanently. That doesn't make any sense at all. But a box squat can be in addition to some of the other things that you're doing. It would be a mistake to squat onto a box, to squat 600 pounds in a box and just take that lift and think you're going to go to a powerlifting meet and squat 600 pounds, because things don't work that way. It's more complicated than that. You have to know how to do the actual movement itself. So my recommendation is just to add box squats in. If you're somebody that squats twice a week, maybe add a box squat in as that second day, or maybe add it in as a third day for some extra types of squats. But the hugest advantage with a box squat is going to be able to get into your hips. I can guarantee you, if I worked with just about everybody in this room, with the exception of some people that have done them, you guys are going to look insanely weak at a box squat just because you haven't done it before. So what does that tell you? It tells you that your potential is high to be able to improve that very easily. Once that's brought up to par and once that's okay, you don't have to worry about it again for a while. Then you can start to bring it back in. You bring things in, you kick things out. You bring in something like a front squat for a few weeks. You're like, okay, like a couple of first weeks sucked. I hated it. My strength was really low. You bring it up, boom, you move it back out. Bent over rows. You try bent over rows. You haven't done them in a year or 6 months. Terrible at them. You bring them up, boom, you kick them to the side. So that's the box squat. Another question on the squat? What we got? Yeah, that's a mobility issue. There's kind of goes beyond the scope of some of this stuff, but basically there's a drill that you could do if you were to lay on your back and somebody just kind of moved your legs around. Even if you just moved your own legs around, it's actually easier if somebody else does it. I would do it with Omar, but it would get extremely weird. When you're doing this movement, if somebody just moves your legs up, just wherever your knee kind of naturally wants to go to, is the position that you should be in for a squat. So you could try something like that. You can even just like lay down on the ground, just really bring your leg up. And if your leg comes straight this way, then you're probably more than likely somebody who's very comfortable with a closed stance. But more than likely, your knee is going to go way out, which is going to point your toe way out. And that's probably the way that you should be squatting for a little while. Now, again, you want to always work towards being better. So you don't want to always just lift where you're comfortable. You want some variation. So you'd also want to try to lift with your foot a little bit straighter. And that's where you take advantage of something like a box squat. And for yourself, the lower that you go, the more that foot's going to want to twist outward. So you would squat onto something a little bit higher. Another question? Furious Pete.
Just a general question, because I used to do low bar squats, now it's some high bar squats. Do you think it's important to like kind of good at both in order to really get, overall like the strongest that you can be at a squat?
That's an amazing question because it touches upon something that I think is really important. We should all be proficient at everything in the gym. There shouldn't have to be certain conditions and rules for you to not suck at a lift in the gym. You shouldn't need anything special. The bar shouldn't have to be low for you to be strong. The bar shouldn't have to be high for you to be strong. You shouldn't have to wear special shoes to be strong. You should be able to be strong under any circumstance and in any position. And so therefore, having said that, you should be able to nail a good, strong, conventional deadlift. You should be able to nail a good, strong sumo deadlift. If somebody asks you to do some pull-ups, you should be able to bang out some pull-ups. If somebody asks you to do a high bar squat, you should be able to party with them and bang out some good high bar squats. That would be the goal. I mean, the truth is you're not going to be good at everything, but that would be the goal. That would be what you want to try to aspire to do and aspire to be. There's some advantages and disadvantages of each lift, but in the case of a high bar squat, those of you that struggle getting depth, a high bar squat is going to be superior most of the time because it's going to help push you straight down to the ground a lot easier, and you can break parallel a lot easier that way for most people. Low bar squat is a trick. It's powerlifting. Powerlifting tricks. The powerlifting tricks, you don't always want to have to use those in your training. Your training should be harder than the contest itself. In Olympic weightlifting, the objective is to always move super fast through a movement. some of the weightlifters and CrossFitters I've worked with, I don't know anything about Olympic lifting, literally don't know shit about it. I've only seen some people do it. I'm impressed by it. I think it's amazing. But I don't know anything about the sport. It's a different sport than powerlifting. But what I have been able to help a few people with is just sometimes slowing down their squat, because a lot of times in Olympic lifting, a lot of times they'll kind of dive bomb their squat. And you see that a lot with CrossFitters too, because they're accountable for doing some high reps. Your fight, your training, should be harder than the actual event itself. It should always be more difficult. So find ways to make things more difficult. When it comes to something like dive bombing on a squat, a high bar squatter, you'll see somebody, and some people are really good at it, and they'll go to a contest and they'll hit big weights that way. Just because you compete that way, and just because that's your expression of you being your strongest, doesn't mean that you should actually train that way all the time. Because with great risk can come a lot of problems, right? When you try to just all of a sudden drop and bottom out in a big squat, and you try to rebound off your own body, that could potentially be dangerous. If you slow things down, though, in your training, and you did 5 sets of 5 with 405, then you try to squat 600 pounds in the meet and dive bomb it, I guarantee you it's probably going to be pretty easy, because you controlled all those weights in training. Even though the weights are so drastically different, that might be too extreme an example, but you get the point. You can get more out of doing less when you slow your shit down and when you learn how to attack things from different angles. In powerlifting, we have some tricks. One trick is for people to squat a little bit wider. One trick is to get that bar lower down on our back. I think you should be able to do whatever type of squat. So like if somebody wants to challenge you, you should be able to have fun with it, and you shouldn't be like, oh shit, I'm gonna be 100 pounds weaker because I normally squat with a special squat bar in a monolift, you know, and I normally squat this very specific way. Don't end up being like me. That's what ended up happening to me over a long period of time, and now I'm swimming upstream. I'm fighting back against all that. But you should be able to squat in many different positions, many different ways. For most people, squatting with the bar low is going to lead to a bigger squat, because in powerlifting, a lot of times the guy's not touching his ass on the floor. A lot of times the guy's going to lean forward. A lot of powerlifters will have a really strong lower back, especially statically from all the heavy deadlifts that you handle. And you'll just keep leaning forward until your hips start to get to breaking parallel, and then you're able to come back up with the weight. So you should be able to be able to squat either way. And then also too, I think people are too worried about it sometimes. Find a position that feels good to you for now. Work on it. Work on getting stronger at it, and that's when you're going to want to start to work about. You're going to want to start to worry about some of the micros that happen. Other questions? All right. We got yellow over here.
My question is, will it, my lack of calves, will that hinder my squat?
That was rude.
That's from Omar. Get out.
Again, you want to try to attack everything from all angles, so are the calves important? Sure. Try to work as much shit as you can, and if you are somebody that does some sprints or pushes some of the sleds around, some of the prowler around, your calves will get stronger from some of that stuff. Try to do as many different exercises as you can think of to try to improve your strength. Does anybody have any questions, not just about the squat, but we'll just take some questions in general. What do we got?
Attempt selection. What's the best way to go about it?
Attempt selection can be really tricky, because everyone is so different and so specific about the way that they select their lifts. But again, you have to understand the fact that the central nervous system is something that needs to be primed and ready for the lifts that you're going to do. But it also can't be so taxed and fried from all the lifts that you do. I think a lot of times what happens in powerlifting is we train a certain way, and our training doesn't always get us in shape enough for the contest and for us to perform. You need about like 4 or 5 heavy lifts per squat, per bench, per deadlift in order to really successfully get through a powerlifting meet, because sometimes Sometimes one squat could really be equal to like 2 squats when you have to turn it into a good morning, right? It's going to really suck your energy and really suck your power. Also, sometimes when you're doing your warm-ups, your last warm-up attempts and things like that, sometimes those aren't accounted for. Even though those are still lighter, those still register and those still have an effect on your body. So attempt selection can be very tricky. What I would say with that is I always like to open very light and just smoke a weight, and you get to prove to yourself and everybody else in the room that you understand how to lift. I would normally say that it's with every lifter that I ever work with, I always encourage, I never make anybody do anything because it's your meet. I always encourage people to open lighter than what they want to do. Because the contest isn't about what you open with, hopefully. The contest is going to be about where you finish. So can you strategically select some weights that allow you to finish a little bit further ahead than you may have? Have you opened a little bit too heavy? I think so. I believe so. I've seen it happen many times over. In the case of something like a deadlift, which happens at the end of a powerlifting meet, that's where you really want to have that weight be really low just so that you're actually in the meet. Your energy levels are weird at that point. You've had a lot of Monster energy drinks and a bunch of other shit in your body and Gatorade, and your sugar levels are up and down and things are going all over the place and you feel like shit. And the weight that the warm-up weight, the first warm-up weight that you touch feels like 1,000,000 pounds. You're like, I don't even know how I'm going to get on the platform. This is embarrassing. So your opening deadlift, in my opinion, should probably be one that you're the most cautious of, because also on a deadlift, in my opinion, you can make bigger jumps a little bit easier than you could on something like a bench press. Female lifters seem to be more sensitive to it, especially when it comes to the bench press. I've noticed with some girls, going up 6 pounds or just a few pounds can really, really make a huge difference. You're going to have to know yourself and know how you feel with those lifts. And why not practice all this in your training? Why not have a good understanding of what the meet's going to roll out and look like in your training? Why not even do like a mock meet occasionally and start to learn from the mistakes that you're making in training, learn from some of the things you're doing right in your training. A lot of the USAPL and IPF lifters pay tons and tons of attention to their attempt selection. I would suggest listening to some advice from Bryce Lewis. Susie Hartwig, I think, is another one. There's a lot of people that write good articles and a lot of people that have a lot of great information about very, very specifically and strategically how to select those weights. But in my opinion, most people should just start a lot lighter than what they want. It's a powerlifting meet. You got 3 judges with their eyes laser beamed and glued on you. You have to prove to yourself and those around you every single time that you know how to lift.
I'm prepping for a meet soon, and my squat's going great, my bench is going great. My deadlift is now terrible. You said about how so you go ahead with certain things, you do certain things behind. I'm like 6 weeks out, I don't even know if I can deadlift anything.
It gets to be difficult because the longer that you power lift, the harder it gets. And you're going to run into all kinds of situations where you don't necessarily feel the best about a given lift. At that time, I think some of the best things that you can do going into a contest is to maybe just not worry about that lift as much. You still have to do it in your training. You can't scrap it completely. As long as you're not injured, I would still execute that lift and I'd still work on that lift. But I'd maybe do something in that case in particular. I'd maybe do something where I do speed work 1 week and a heavier lift the next. And I'd plan it out to where your speed deadlift is approximately 5 to 7 days before the actual contest itself. And that way you'd have almost 14 days of recovery from your last heavy deadlift. Again, just because you're bench pressing doesn't mean it's not going to affect your squat. If your bench is going well and your squat is going well, it'll have accumulation. It will show up somewhere at some point. Powerlifting is very difficult. It's very difficult to get all 3 lifts heading in the right direction the entire time. I mentioned earlier my brother passing away in 2008. It was December 14th, 2008. December 13th, 2008, I broke the all-time USPF record in bench press and in total the day before that. And on that particular day, I was able to get some good momentum going into the contest, and I was able to end up with a deadlift that was sufficient enough for me to break that all-time 308 record. My brother passed the next day, but before I went into the meet, I hurt something in my lower back that made me not be able to deadlift for like 2 weeks. After the meet, my brother dies the next day. I actually went to call him and tell him how I did the next day, and that was that, and my dad told me that he passed on, right? So I take a few weeks from training. I'm fucking super sad, devastated. Our family's very close. My brother, part of the reason why I have a goal to make the world a better place to lift is that my brother was my mentor. My brother was the one that put a barbell on my back and told me to squat. And so I'm forever indebted to him, and this is a way to pass on his memory is through a lot of you guys. When he passed away, I started going back into the gym. And I knew better. I knew I needed to be careful because I knew I was going to want to lift like a maniac. I wanted to dedicate the next contest that I did to him. And I started getting back into training, and I was strategically trying to set the weights up so they were low enough for me to not get too far ahead of myself. I knew I had a lot of reasons and a lot of emotion behind me to hit some big lifts. So I go to the gym one day and I go to do a rack deadlift. And I have it set up for the day that the most weight I was going to end with on the day was 675. I told you a while back that when I was at Westside, which was almost 10 years prior, that I did a 635 deadlift for a single, being a lot lighter and a lot newer to the sport. So I go to do the 675 deadlift for a triple out of the rack, and the weights are flying that day. Everything's cruising. And I'm prepping for the Los Angeles Fit Expo, which is now a thing. At the time, it wasn't a thing. It was much smaller. And at the Los Angeles Fit Expo is going to be some of the best lifters in the world. And so I'm super fired up and getting my training going. And now we're probably about 5 or 6 weeks out. So I got this specific day set up to lift this specific weight. 585, I crush it. 635, I crush it for a set of 3. Weights are moving really fast. I'm feeling really good. But to be honest with you, I am being too aggressive because, again, driven by my brother's passing, I'm trying to dedicate the meet to him. And so I'm lifting like a motherfucker, right? I get the 675 on there, and the first rep I go to pull it, and boom, there goes my bicep. And I sit down, and I'm just sitting there like this, and I'm like, holy shit, man. I'm like, you kind of know, like it's a weird thing. It's a weird feeling. It feels like if you were to have a carpet in your hand, you ripped it. It feels like that, but it's inside your body, so it's like hot. And I just look down at my arm, and I watch my left bicep roll up, like in front of my eyes. I had no control over it. I'm just sitting there watching it. And it's creeping up and creeping up. And you guys can see it's still kind of flat down towards the bottom, and that's because I tore it years ago. So that sucker just started to roll up, and it was torn, and I only had about 4 weeks to get ready for the meet. So what I decided to do is about 2 days later, this arm is black and blue from my boobie all the way to my wrist. It's actually just black, pretty much just black. And so I go into the gym and I'm like, okay, I can't really deadlift for a little bit, but I can still squat, and I'm going to see if I can bench press. I play around with some of that. I'm able to do it in some ways to where I think I can get enough stimulus to go to the meet, still dedicate the meet to my brother. Week or two goes by. I'm like, okay, no matter what, I'm doing the meet. And maybe there just won't be a deadlift, or maybe like I won't lift the best. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least I can still forge forward and have something to be excited about. So I switched my grip up in my training for the deadlift, because this was my underhand. This is the one I tore. So I switched hands, and about a week and a half before the meet, I deadlift a whopping 405 pounds. and it hurt really bad, almost to the point where when I put the weight back down, I almost passed out. But I'm like, okay, that's enough weight to at least lift something at the end of the meet. I'm gonna go fucking do it. I'm gonna go make my big brother proud, right? So I go down to Los Angeles Fit Expo, some of the best lifters in the world, one of them being one of my training partners at the time. That was a whole other side thing that was very difficult to deal with. We get going into the contest, and wow, this story is a lot deeper than I remember. I'll just say it. We get deeper into the contest, and I hit a squat, and I have my elbow is bandaged up, because fuck me and fuck my elbow. My elbow's hurt for years. And I do the lift. It's like 835 pounds or 833 or something squat. Boom, I nail it. Great depth, great everything. I get a red light. And I was like, okay, I've never hit a lift before that I knew that I did the right way. Like I always knew, you know, I didn't lock it out, or this happened, oh, maybe you got me, you bastards, I didn't squat low enough, or whatever it is, right? But this one, I was sure about. The crowd responded to it, everybody was all excited. And then so I was like, well, you know, what happened? And they're like, you have Velcro on your arm. And I was like, oh. I was like, they said, it's illegal to have Velcro on your arm. I got all this checked out before the meet. I got all this taken care of before the meet. I tore my bicep. So I had my arm wrapped because my bicep was burning when I was squatting, right? So they said it's against the rules. I'm like, all right, fuck me, it's against the rules. And that was Steve Dennison who turned that lift down, because he was running the USPF now. He now has his own company, right, and his own agenda. I later invented the compression cuffs that I sell on my website because of him, because I wasn't allowed to wear Velcro in his meet on my elbows, and so he helped me come up with a product. So thank you, Steve Dennison. Anyway, I say, okay, fuck that, I'm gonna go up in weight anyway, which is not a smart idea. I take the Velcro thing off and I go squat a little bit more, 865 or 843 or whatever it is. And I'm pretty competitive with where everybody else is at, and I'm looking at the numbers and stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to really bench anything because of my arm. You know, I have been practicing and stuff, but I haven't really handled anything that heavy. I do my opening attempt. My opening attempt, I've always been a gifted bencher, and when it came to shirted bench pressing, especially in the single ply stuff, I was able to kick everybody's ass pretty good. So even though my bench was not great, I was still about 80 pounds ahead of the guy that went before me on the bench press. So I did like a 760 bench press or something like that. I went out and I brought it down, and I got the weight to touch, and I just went wham, and it went flying up, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, all right, well, today's going to be a special day. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I ended up doing like an 833 or 832. I can't even remember the number anymore, what the number was in the bench. At the time, it was an all-time record for single ply, full meet powerlifting in general. Anyway, so I move on. I nail that bench, and I get up off the bench, and I look at my bicep, and my bicep is like twitching, because this is the bicep that I tore. I was like, what the fuck is going on with this thing? But I have a bench shirt on, so the bench shirt's kind of holding everything together. And I go to walk into the back, and one of the lifters, one of the best lifters in the world at the time, he just shakes his head, and he goes, it's over, man. He's like, you won, man. He's like, congratulations, give me a pat on the back. And that was one of the coolest things that ever happened to me in powerlifting, because as I mentioned, even my opening attempt was about 90 pounds ahead. My 833-pound bench press was 200 pounds ahead of the guy that lifted before me. So I hit that bench, and then when it came time to deadlift, everything was already over and sealed up and done with. All I had to do was a 705-pound deadlift. Now keep in mind, I said I didn't deadlift at all in my training except for 405 pounds, which made me almost pass out. I was fired up. I mean, literally had tears in my eyes, goosebumps from head to toe, thinking about my brother and dedicating the meet to him. 705 was like lifting up a piece of fucking paper at that point. Ended up hitting a 755 deadlift, and that was that. The rest was history. But the point being is that life will throw you all sorts of curveballs in your training, and you always have to be ready for an audible. You always have to be ready to do something different. Okay, I blew out this bicep. This arm's not going to work this way anymore. I'm going to go like this. Within reason, right? We don't want to jack ourselves up too much, but that's what makes us different than other people. I mentioned before about being made out of something different. By taking this resistance that we have here and applying it to everything that you do, you can be better at every single thing that you're currently doing. I can be better at every single thing that I'm currently working on. My company can make more money. I could have more sales. I could be a better dad. I could be a better husband. I could be a better friend. How many of you guilty in here of being a shitty friend sometimes? Right? Like, just sometimes you're just a shit friend. Somebody texts you, you don't fucking answer him back. I think you said you texted me. Love this guy. I didn't answer him back. It's just, it happens, right? And no one's going to ever be perfect, but there's so many fucking things to work on all the time that's what gets me so excited. And that's why I can talk about lifting and I can talk about this kind of shit from the time that I wake up until the time that I fucking pass out. I was here the other night with Omar until the wee hours, and then up the next morning training with Furious. I love this stuff. This stuff is a passion for me. This whole seminar and stuff, you know, coming here and speaking to you guys, I had no idea what I was going to talk about for today. It just kind of happens because I lift and I'm inspired by all of you guys, by the stuff I see you guys doing, and by the stories that I get shared with from a lot of you guys. I get inspired from inspiring you guys, and it turns into one big giant circle, and everybody gets more out of it. That the longer I've been doing this, the more energy I have for it. I fucking love this shit. This stuff just comes right from the heart. I'm not trying to give you guys a speech. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. This seminar was done for free. And it's really simple why it was done for free. Does anybody know? Because I'm a millionaire. No, it was free because the best things in life are free. And it doesn't cost you anything to tell somebody that you love them or tell someone that you fucking care about them. It didn't cost Pete. I know Pete was telling me what a hectic day he had. He got a bunch of different stuff to do. Omar's got a lot of these guys, a lot of you guys here have obligations, you have families, and you figured out a way to fucking come here and support this. We all have a lot of different things to do. We all have things that we can get better at. We can all spend a little extra time with somebody. We can all do a little bit more. It doesn't always have to cost money. I told my daughter a story a while back, and this is where we're going to finish for today. When we are done, I need a break to just down some agua, but you guys can line up in whatever orientation you want for pictures or whatever the hell you want. I will not be giving away my underwear or my socks. You see? And I figured that I had to mention that because weird things have happened at some of these. You have a question?
Yeah, actually. So we briefly touched on like the nervous system and your CNS. So say if you're someone who has like a lot of weakness such as myself, how are you supposed to like, I guess, formulate this brand new training program that you have to personalize for yourself when you don't exactly understand how your body works?
It's all a giant experimentation. And by the way, Mark Bell doesn't formulate anything. I don't like using a bunch of numbers, so I don't write anything down. I don't track calories. I don't track even the lifts I do. I don't track any of that kind of stuff. The easiest way of accomplishing that is to just go in and lift and go in and start doing it. If you don't have a good general understanding of some of that, then I would advise that you hire a coach. Somebody that you can meet in person would be best at first. an online coach. There's a lot of great online training programs out there. Would be second. But the most important thing to do is to learn stuff for yourself. Louis Simmons has a great quote where he said, your mom can, or your sister can help you get a girlfriend, your mom and dad can help you get a car, but only you yourself can help yourself with a 700-pound deadlift. I always thought that was kind of funny and kind of quirky and kind of weird, but actually like very true. You're going to have to experiment a lot in here and try to figure out what feels right and what doesn't. It's hard to, the reason why programming and stuff like that can work and having an online coach or somebody in person is because you're probably going to be too easy on yourself, which can be really valuable in the beginning, but not so valuable as you try to move forward. So if you feel like you're really lost and you're kind of overwhelmed with what's going on, the most important thing is to take that first step forward and be consistent. Try to get here a certain amount of times a week. Keep the fruit low hanging so you can pick it off as much as possible, and make sure that it's something that you can actually do. Make sure you can follow through with how many times a week you say that you want to come to the gym. Get that part of it done. Make it simple. Train like 2-3 body parts a day and just keep it really, really easy. Anyway, back to my story. So I was talking to my daughter one day, and you know, she was just saying, "Oh, I love you, Dada." She's super sweet. She's not enough people speak with emotion like that, you know, and it's really a wonderful thing to have someone that communicates that. It makes me feel like $1 million whenever she says anything like that. And so we're talking, and you know, I'm talking about, you know, how important it is for me to spend time with her, and I try to explain to the kids about some of this stuff that I'm doing with work, and I'm not always going to, you know, be there all the time, but I try to be there as much as I possibly can, and just kind of how all this shit works, right? And so I said, you know, I said, Quinn, I said, you know how do you spell the word love? And she was like, L-O-V-E. And I was like, that's right. I said, but another way to spell love is T-I-M-E. The time that you put into people shows them how much you actually care. Think about when somebody's sick in the hospital. Nothing is fucking better than calling somebody or showing up. Showing up is the best thing. Anybody you know that needs to go to the hospital for anything, this is a pro wrestling tip. It's a pro wrestling rule, because a lot of us ended up in the hospital for a lot of different reasons, and nothing lights your face up better than seeing a buddy come into the room. Again, what did that cost that person to do that? Maybe it cost them a little bit of money in like gas or whatever to get there, right? But it doesn't really cost you much of anything. You did have to you had to spend time though. And that's what gets the person so excited, is they know in their head that you spent time on them. That's the most important thing. So fast forward a few weeks later, and it was my birthday, and I open up a present from Quinn, and it's a rock that's in the shape of a heart, and on one side of it it says time, on the other side of it says love. So I just thought that was amazing. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Thank you guys so much. Standing ovation.